I am Jeff Luther, and the host of your new favorite podcast, the Inspector Alliance. This is where we'll peel back the curtain and get behind successful service industry businesses to see just what makes them tick. We're going to focus around the home inspection business. That's what I've built. I've owned it for a little over 20 years now. But we'll also include other service businesses that might parallel ours so we can learn more. And the more we know, the better off we are, right? All right, so we got another great episode of the Inspector Alliance this week, and I'm fortunate enough to have a guest accompany us, Tom Lloyd. Tom, how long have you been with Home Pro?
Coming up on 6 years next month.
Okay. Wow, feels like just yesterday.
Yeah, it does. Sure does.
But you've been in the industry now. You were with you've been doing home inspections for a while prior to coming on board with us, right?
I worked for another company for another couple of years prior to coming here. I used to do HUD inspections. I'm also a licensed real estate broker. We had a HUD contract, so I did a lot of HUD inspections, not quite as in depth as what we do today, but I've been inspecting homes for pretty much all my adult life in one format or another.
Yeah, and your family actually owned a real estate company, right?
Yep, I grew up in the real estate industry. I was hiding under desks when customers would come in. That's where I went, was hide under the desks while they handled the business. Usually got in trouble because I was always banging into the desk and playing with my cars. And
sometimes you still wish you could hide under a desk, right?
Oh, every day.
I know I do.
Every day.
All right, so we're going to try to prove or disprove my theory of the home inspector, and I sometimes will say that the more you know, the worse off you are, because the home inspection is difficult, man. It's you're always learning, and I'll explain it this way: you learn things that change in the profession. And then sometimes you become less valuable as an inspector. Now we're bringing things up that no one knew about. We're doing it in the process of a real estate transaction. It was fine when the house was sold to the folks that are selling it now, and now there's something that needs to be adjusted, fixed, repaired, or addressed when they're on the way out of the house selling it. So sometimes the more you know, the worse off you are, right?
Yeah, there you go. Everything's 3 to 5 to 10 years older when they sell it than when they bought it, but it was working fine when they bought it. So,
yeah, it's like the people that don't see your kids for 4 or 5 years, and they show up and they're like, oh my gosh, look how big he is. No bigger than he was yesterday.
Right.
The gradual change people don't notice.
Right.
So this brings up a good one for me. It's problem building products. The challenge is, it's working fine, or it looks fine to me. And that's a familiar phrase when we're dealing with problem building products. Or for me, when I was doing inspections, one of the worst things in the world was you find a roof, for example, that is no granules left on it, truly on its actual deathbed.
Yep.
And the root, and you can't find a leak anywhere.
Yep.
And what does the seller say?
It's fine. Nothing wrong. No leak.
I've had this 20-year roof for 35 years. I haven't had a single problem. Right. So even the best materials deteriorate. They require replacement over time. Things break. That's why we have Lowe's and Home Depot. That's why they're in business, doing quite well, actually. So for our audience, Tom not only is a veteran for us with our company, he's a veteran home inspector, and of course you've heard his accolades. He's been in the industry for a very long time. But he also is responsible for how our organization reports on items that go into our findings, how our findings are actually reported. So he's intimately familiar with the phrase words have meaning. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. He does all the cleanup and all the preparation for any of our language that goes into our report writing. So Tom, starting with just a few problem building products, what are a couple of known problem products that you've come across in your tenure?
There's a handful. We have, starting at the top, Atlas Chalet shingles is one and those are kind of phasing themselves out just because they're all worn out and been replaced. So we're not seeing as many of those as we used to a few years ago. Federal Pacific and Zinsco electrical panels. We got polybutylene plumbing. That's always a hot button around here. We still see quite a bit of that. And hardboard siding is another one that we still see quite a bit that pops up quite often for us.
Yeah. So, and when we see these in a house, and I have actually a really good story. Don't let me forget about the geyser. But when we see these in a house, it's because they have not failed yet. Would that be accurate?
If they have not failed, they are definitely in the process of failing. It's like we like to say, it works fine until it doesn't.
Yeah. And without causing you too much stress in an answer, giving us play by play, how do you know when you see these? Is it just, you know it when you see it? It's one of those things like remarkable, right? Be remarkable is one of our core values. You don't know really what it is, but you know it when you see it.
Yeah, it is.
The same thing you would describe these?
I was just counting up today. I'm pushing 3,000 inspections that I've done so far in my career. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of electrical panels and seen a lot of roofs. And then when you see the ones that are wrong, they jump out at us, at a certain point of experience. So a lot of it comes with experience and just knowing what to look for, and looking for those red flags.
Right. Yep. So I don't know if you can answer this, but I'm curious if we have a lot of inspectors that listen to this podcast, right? Most of them, well, I guess it'll be a wide range, folks that are new, folks that are veterans, folks somewhere in between. But let's say we had a homeowner or maybe somebody new in the trades that was listening to this today, and they weren't quite sure what they were looking at. Do you know of a way? Is there a way that they could go find an image or maybe figure out if they were looking at polybutylene or a Federal Pacific panel?
Yeah, well, the internet is invaluable. We got YouTube and Google, and of course we got Facebook. Everything's on Facebook. So, not that that's a great source by any means, but there's so much information out there. It's pretty easy to do a quick Google search on an electrical panel. But there again, they always run the risk of every product, every industry, every manufacturer has problems with some of their systems. So they got to be careful what they're reading, whether is it an issue or is it not? Is it an isolated issue? Is it something that's system wide or just one of these minute pieces of their puzzle that had some problems that got a lot of notoriety for a short time? So, when you run into the cases where the class action lawsuits happened, like for polybutylene and hardboard siding, now we're getting into some more potential good information versus some disgruntled keyboard warriors, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. So for you, we've got the Federal Pacific panel, Zinsco panel, Atlas Chalet shingle, hardboard siding, polybutylene. For you as an inspector, which one is the one where you're moving along in your inspection, then you see it and it's like, which one's the most dreaded? Which one gives you the biggest, deepest sigh?
It's interesting. Part of my brain, when we find something like this, a Zinsco panel, for example, when we find it, home inspectors are weird because part of our brain is like, cool, I found something really cool. But then it quickly goes to, somebody's got to deal with this now, and somebody's gonna have to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
a weird thought process to go through when we find something bad. Um, so it's interesting.
So which one's your most dreaded?
Oh, but most dreaded. I forgot the question. Probably what I saw last. You know, the roof is the most expensive, by far. So I don't know. It's hard to say. They're all so bad that it could be a deal killer, and that always, you feel bad. You feel bad for the client because now that they got to start, potentially they could be starting the process all over again, and the seller's got to start their process all over again. So,
yeah, maybe. I think for me, polybutylene was always the one that was most difficult. So when I would come across that, it's working fine, right? Like plumbing, it's either working or it's not. It's
yeah,
pretty obvious. So
yeah,
that was always the most dreaded one for me.
that's true. And the polybutylene, you can't physically see it going bad. You can see the roof going bad. You can see the siding going bad. These electrical panels are old. They look old. So you've got a little bit of a visual, but the plumbing, turn the faucet on, the water comes out. Flush a toilet, it flushes.
Yeah.
Plumbing works fine.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and that was the polybutylene plumbing was always the one that I got the most pushback. Well, it's tell me why it's wrong. It's totally fine. It's been in my house for 40 years. Next door neighbor has copper, been in his house for 40 years. You don't write those up. So that was always a struggle for me. So for you, when you find these, what is the hardest part for you about finding the products? Is it writing it up? Is it explaining what it is, why it's wrong, delivering the information, the follow-up questions?
it's breaking the bad news because the homeowners are always, they're excited. The real estate transaction is a roller coaster of emotions. So when they
Sure.
find a home, they've negotiated it, they're excited about it. They're already moving in their mind. While I'm doing my inspection, they're measuring to see if their couch and dressers fit in the rooms.
Yeah.
And we get together at the end of it, and I tell them that there's potentially a $20,000 repair that could be coming up because they have polybutylene plumbing. And the next question is, well, what is that? So then we got to go get all technical and watch their eyes glaze over as we try to explain what polybutylene plumbing is and why it's bad. And just like you say, it's working now, isn't it? It's fine now, isn't it? Yeah, today, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm of I come from a different perspective. I think for me, it's not bad. It's good news. Hey, I got good news for you. You're finding out now.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. So that to me is the purpose of the home inspection.
I think that's called good to know news.
What's that?
I think that's called good to know news.
Yeah. But so out of all of these, is there one that comes to mind that you get, speaking of follow-up questions, right? Mm-hmm. We make ourselves very available for our folks for follow-up questions. Absolutely. And in instances such as these, there tend to be quite a bit. Is there one product in regard to the others that stands out more, that they come back? Because this was common for me. The seller said it was fine because. The seller said it was fine because they had a plumber over there. The seller said it was fine because they had an electrician over there. Is there any of these that stand out to you?
The one that makes me cringe a little bit is if like getting into the electrical panels, some of these older electrical panels, because now it's not just a water leak. Now we're potentially looking at a house fire if things go, worst case scenario. So the one that's always most concerning to me is if it's a old, one of these red flag electrical panels themselves.
Is there one of these products that you find that people come back more and say that they're okay versus
Not really. Not that comes to my mind. Not in my experience. I'll put it that way. Not in my experience.
okay? Yeah, it seems to me that the panels were always ones that came back, and had questions to me where the listing agent or the buyer would come back and say, "Hey, we had an electrician over here to replace this panel, and they said that it was fine." I'm like, well, I think our standard answer is where you're paying us for our opinion that's built on decades of experience. What, 150 years, I think, combined experience is what we have.
Hmm.
And our opinion is different. So it was, seemed like that was a consistent issue for us. So for those folks that maybe aren't in your position where they were, you're seeing the true inside workings of a real estate transaction. I'll ask you a fun question. When you come across one of these known problem products and you deliver that information, do the buyers and the sellers handle it the same?
Yes and no. They a lot of times they both see dollar signs, but they're on the opposite side of that dollar sign. The buyer is salivating. Ooh, $20,000! Wow, I can get $20,000 off the sale price, or they're going to write me a check for $20,000. And then the seller, of course, is thinking, oh no, I'm going to shell out $20,000 for this. So they do look at it a little bit different there. And it's funny. Some buyers have a different set of expectations, I guess. They may realize that there are some underlying issues, or an expectation that there's going to be some underlying issues. So some of them take it a lot better than others, and some of them we're just crushing their dreams.
Yeah, and I find that wanes with the market, right? Because right now, I mean, it's really tough. There are no houses on the market. So when they do find a house and do actually get under contract, I mean, that's a big deal. And then they find something that's wrong. The seller is, to some degree, really in the driver's seat. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Because it kind of comes back to round two of negotiations at that point sometimes, where they're they've got control. They can either start all over again, or they've got control of moving on and renegotiating. So
yeah, and they got a line down the street of folks that want to buy their house.
Yeah. Yep.
So this was really, I have two really funny stories. Well, I say funny, they're funny to me. It was probably, I don't know, within my first 25 inspections, I booked this really large house. It was in Country Club of the South. And I'm pulling in to do this inspection. I'm winding through the streets, all these big houses. I was a little bit intimidated. And as I'm getting closer and closer and closer, I see this house that's covered in scaffolding. And this was my first experience with synthetic stucco. And this house is covered in scaffolding around the outside. All the stucco had been peeled off. All the exterior house wrap was coming off. I was like, oh my gosh. And I'm looking at all these houses in this neighborhood that have stucco. And I was just praying that the house I was about to go inspect didn't have stucco. And I just couldn't remember anything about it. Thankfully, it did not. Had hardboard siding on it, which I was an expert at the time. But that was one of those issues, right? Another one early on in my career, I pulled up to a house. This is no kidding. I pulled into the driveway of a house that had just this geyser out in the front yard. The house that I was inspecting, and the main water line going into the house, the supply line, had ruptured that morning after those people left to go to work, after the homeowners left. And it was polybutylene. It was Big Blue. I don't know if you remember that run. Mm-hmm. Those are two experiences that I've had with these problem products.
Wow.
What about you? Any real life experiences with any of these?
Um,
On a home inspection? You have to
on a home
divulge like.
inspection, for some reason I have the reputation in our company of seeing the Twilight Zone houses, as some of them call it. It just some of the goofiest stuff. I think we all see it. I'm just the one that has the weird sense of humor that thinks it's hilarious and has to show all my friends what I'm seeing. Um,
Yeah, you get the fun ones.
yeah. I had an interesting one a few weeks ago. It was almost witness to a house fire. Going back to the electrical panels, this was I believe it was a Zensco panel, and this is a flip home. They had done some pretty major renovations. I had gone through most of the house. When I got to the electrical panel, I noticed there was a couple of breakers that had been tripped, and that made sense why part of the living room and dining room had no, the outlets didn't have any power. So that made sense at that point. And when we see Zensco,
So for some inspectors newer in the business, what do you do when you come across breakers in a panel that have been turned to the off position or they've already been tripped?
if they're off or been tripped, we don't know why they're tripped or who tripped them or who turned them off. Usually, if they're in the off position, it's for a good reason. There's something downstream uh, that is unsafe, so the breaker is just turned off. So we never turn those breakers back on. If something's been tripped, well, obviously something has shorted or something to cause those breakers to trip. And especially it being a Zensco panel, our policy, I know some states are required to take the cover off of any panel. But when we see a Zensco panel, we document it, we take a picture, and leave it alone. We don't take those covers off.
So what about if the breakers, if you come to any panel
Oh
and the
yeah,
breakers are off or they've been tripped, what do you do?
we document it. We take a picture of the breakers in the position, in the off position, or in the tripped position, and document that these breakers have been tripped or off, and to advise further evaluation. Get first of all, start with information from the seller. Why are these off? Do you know these are off? Sometimes they may not even realize they've been tripped. And then if they don't know why or can't provide any information, then we recommend an electrician that's more equipped than we are to take those covers off and take a look and figure out what went wrong and what to fix.
All right, so back to your story. Any real life experiences? You said you had gotten to the panel and some breakers were off.
Right. So again, according to our policy, I took the pictures, documented that the breakers were tripped, and went about with my inspection. And about an hour later, the agent shows up and just kind of bringing him up to speed. We've older AC systems. The roof is new. Electrical panel is a Zensco panel, and of course that always begs the question: well, what's a Zensco panel? So we explain the Zensco, what's wrong with it, what the defects are, and why we don't inspect them as we normally would a square D panel or a modern panel. And so I think we've got some other outlets that are dead, they're inoperative. So I'm assuming they're connected to the same circuits, but I can't tell because we're not going to turn those on. This one really bothered me for some reason. I don't know why, but it really, really bothered me. These breakers were tripped.
Yep.
And so he says, okay. So I'm like, well, let me finish up. I got 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. Let me finish up. I'll be right back. So I'm about halfway up the stairs, and I hear him tell me, he said, I think I'm going to turn those breakers on. And it took me a second to realize what he was saying. And by the time it registered in my mind and I could formulate a response, to tell him not to, he'd already tripped him. And we hear this loud bang, electrical surge bang, and scared me because I thought he had gotten shocked. So I'm running down the stairs, are you okay? You okay? And he comes out of the laundry room where it was, and he says, yeah, but we've got a fire. And he's pointing behind me. So I'm turning around looking at the outlets. I'm expecting sparks coming out of the outlets or something crazy, And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, do I have a fire extinguisher in the car? No, we don't have a fire extinguisher. Why don't we have a fire extinguisher in the car? We should really have fire extinguishers in the car. Do I have a bucket of water? Can we get some water? Can I throw some water in it? Well, that's not a good idea. Throw water on electrical fire. So all this is processing through my mind all at once. And I'm still looking around for the fire. I don't see anything. I'm like, should we call the fire department? I've got to call the office and tell them we just started a house fire. So all of this stuff is going on all at once in my brain. And I'm looking around. She says, "No, look up." And we look up, and the not the cage, but the surround around the ceiling fan, we can see inside there. We can see a small flame inside the ceiling fan itself. And by this time, he's already he had ran back to the electrical panel and just shut everything off. Just turned all the breakers off he could. And he's on the phone with 911, and they say, we got a house fire here, or we got a fire here. He's like, well, wait a minute. No, I think it's going out. No, yep. And we watch the flame slowly extinguish itself inside the fan surround. And so they're asking,
Oh my
"You sure
gosh.
we need it? Are you sure we don't need to come out?" Says, "No, it's gone out. We're good." So he convinces the fire again. Convinces 911. We don't need a fire truck. So we stand there and look at each other for a second, kind of try to collect our thoughts. And he says, "Well, I don't think you need to do the rest of the inspection. I think we're going to call this one right now." But that got intense for a few seconds.
Yeah, I'd say interesting to say the least. That's for sure. All right, man. Well, I've taken more time from you than I agreed to initially. You've been very patient. Thank you. It's been great information.